Good evening. If you go ahead and mark in your psalm books number 915. 915. That will be our invitation song. 915. Once you get that marked, you go ahead and turn to 412. 412. 412. Jesus, hold my hand. We'll be singing the first verse. 412. Jesus, hold my hand. First verse only. Let us sing. As I travel through this pilgrim land, there is a friend who walks with me, leads me safely through the sinking. It is the Christ on Calvary. This would be my prayer, dear Lord, each day to help me do the best I can. For I need thy light to guide me day and night. Blessed Jesus, hold my hand. Blessed Jesus, hold my hand. Yes, I need thee every hour. Through this land, this pilgrim land, by thy saving power, hear my plea, my feeble plea. Lord, dear Lord, look down on me when I kneel in prayer. Blessed Jesus, hold my hand.
625. 625. First verse. 625. If you have it, let us sing. Zion's call sweetly rings over land and sea, bidding us look to realms above. While the light from the throne shines for you and me, let us listen to the call above. Zion's call is ringing, coming from the throne above. I hear it ringing. Let us heed the call above.
332. Lead me to Calvary. 332. We'll be singing the first verse only. King of my life, I crown thee now. Thine shall the glory be. Lest I forget thy thorn crown brow, lead me to Calvary. Lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thy love for thee, lead me to Calvary.
Evening, everybody. I can distinctly remember one time I was sitting in the living room watching one of the presidents give a speech, and Leo walked into the room and said, "What's he lying about now?" And so, and that made me think at that point, maybe I should be a little less cynical in front of the children. Maybe I should kind of taper down my political displeasures, I guess I'd say at the time. And that's how influence works, right? That was my influence on her, was she picked up my cynicism for everything the government was trying to tell me. And at that time I said, maybe I should correct that a little bit. But that's how that works. And there's a scientific word for that. It's a social proximity effect. They say social proximity effect is the people you're around the most, you pick up their habits, you pick up their mannerisms, you pick up the things they like, their dislikes. And it is said through some of these studies I've read over the years that if you'll take your 4 closest friends, you be in the 5th, that you're just a combination of that. You are them. If you'll take your 4 closest friends and look at them, well, you've looked at yourself most of the time, because we just tend as tribal people to collect ourselves to people that are like us, people that have similar tastes, things in common. So we have to be careful about who and what we're doing at all times, and not only us be a good example, as I say, and I had to kind of change what I was doing, but pick those people around us that are good examples to us. And I think I've heard this a lot over the years, and it's always taught. It's always like preached to the young people, and I don't know why. That doesn't make any sense, because I'm just as susceptible to pick bad friends as a teenager, right? So we have to be careful as adults. We have to be careful as young people. No matter where you're at in your Christian life, we're still easily fallible and easily, able to have that be impressionable to other people's bad habits. Of course, people, they discovered this through all these studies, and they see how they wrote papers on it, and they're real smart. They could have just read the Bible, right? They could have just read the Bible and knew this already, because in Proverbs 13:20 it says, "Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm." If you want to learn how to make money, hang out with people that make money, right? If you want to be broke, hang out with broke people. It's just how this works. If you want to get in trouble, hang out with troublemakers. 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, "Do not be deceived. Bad company corrupts good morals." We know that to be true. We know it's true. Besides the fact that God says it's true, we've all lived it. We've all been there. We've all made bad decisions based on the people around us. If you haven't, see me afterward, because we all have. Unless, we made it in the middle of the week. Congratulations on that, by the way. We made it to Wednesday. It's hard, I know, and we're here. But as we go through the rest of the week, let's practice that. Let's practice being around people that are going to lift us up. And let's make sure that the people that are around us, we're doing the same thing for them. And the good thing is, again, you're here tonight, and you're amongst great people, right? And these great people here will lift you up, do whatever needs to be done for you. If you need something, this is a great time to get it done. It's tonight while you're here. So let's have that song.
He abides with us. It is good to see each of you here tonight, worshiping and serving our God. We have made it to Wednesday, and it is a good thing, right? Our God is good and great. We're glad that Paul is back with us. He's only complaining a little bit, right? Okay. So keep him in mind as he continues to recover. We also need to keep Tommy in our prayers as well. They got back today, and grateful that they got back as quick as they did, and they've got a plan worked out to have surgery sometime in the next 2 weeks, and then some things to go on with that. So be mindful and prayerful of him, if you would. Do we have any others that we need to add to our prayer list or updates to those who are on it? Yes, ma'am. Okay, so brain cancer, is that what you said, and put him on hospice? Okay, so let's keep him. Okay, well, let's definitely keep Daniel Coulson. All right, let's keep him in our prayers and the family as well. Any others? Again, updates or additions to prayer list?
One of my friends from Athens is Graham Key. He had brain surgery today, if I'm understanding it correctly, and they got all the tender, but he still needs prayers that everything's going to go well with it.
All right, so Graham Key, let's keep him in our prayers as well. Brain surgery, everything seemed to go well with that. All right.
That's a procedure today on Bart, doing well.
All right, so keep, again, that family in our prayers as well. Any others? Okay. I got you. So O'Neill Skelton, keep his family in our prayers. Not at the hospital anymore, but moved to the nursing home now. I feel like I don't want to add any more to this list, but do we have any more? All right, by way of announcements, if you would, Child Haven is going to be having an open house and book signing on October 19th from 9 to 12. Also, we're going to be having the Ladies' Wings Bible Study at 6 p.m. October 22nd, home of Emory Sanford, so keep that in mind, ladies. Area-wide Bible Bowl, that will be this coming Sunday, right? 2 p.m., where are we meeting for that? Here at the building? All right, meet at Crossroads for that, 2 p.m. October 21st, Teen for Truth at 7 p.m. And then October 27th will be our trunk or treat. So keep that in mind. I think we're trying to get it out to the community as well. So invite your friends and family, invite those that you might know. Bring lots of candy. If the kids don't want it, Tamela, you and me, I guess we'll take care of it. So you'll let me do it? Okay. Yes. Okay. All right. Anyway, let's try to make that I guess maybe a big event. Let's show the community that we're loving and encouraging to those around us. So try to be a part of that if you can. Also, we're going to be having a game night. That's correct. Following the trunk or treat. So kids and I guess young adults, keep that in mind if you want to stay and play games afterwards. All right. Anything else before we get started tonight? Yes, sir. Elders and deacons meeting Sunday morning at 8. Okay. All right. So, man, keep that in mind if it applies to you. If nothing else, if you would, let's bow our heads. We'll have a word of prayer, and then we'll be dismissed to classes. Our dear loving Heavenly Father, we come to you today thankful for this time and this place that we can come and learn and study about you. We are so thankful for the people that are surrounding us, that we have like-minded individuals that love you, that want to learn about you, and that one day want to be in heaven with you. We pray that we would seek to encourage and uplift each other, that we would strive to make it to heaven and help each other to get there as well. And we thank you for Jesus, and it's in his name that we pray. Amen. backing me up here. All right, if you would open to the book of Ecclesiastes. We've gotten to chapter 7. Ecclesiastes chapter 7. Starting with verse 1. Now, last week we ended up, or finished up chapter 6, and we looked at verse 1 of chapter 7. And I left you with a question to kind of answer, and I want us to discuss this. Verse 1 says, "A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of birth." Now, again, we talked about this idea. We often celebrate which day more, birth or death? Birth, right? How many of us have pictures of the day our grandkids or kids were born, and we look back on them and the joy, the light that fills us? Now think of a day where you lost someone you loved. Is it the same feeling? All right, so what is this passage talking about then? Anybody got an idea? What is he saying that the day of death is better than the day of birth is worse than the day of death? What does the soul that, look at the beginning, has a good name in God's sight? What does that soul have that the others do not? Hope. That's the best way to put it, right? What do I have, or what can I fall back on when life gets difficult, when things arise, when whatever happens? I have Christ. So the thought is, those that die in Christ, or those that die that are pleasing or acceptable to God, or as this verse is phrasing it, has that good name. The death of that person is better than his birth, because where is that person going? To their reward, to heaven, to, again, that place that God and Christ have been preparing. You could even go back a few chapters where it talks about how, the stillborn babe is better off than the one that lived, and I think it was the end of chapter 6 where it talked about the person that lived for 2,000 years and enjoyed all the pleasures, yet it's vanity, if they're not willing to please God or do what God says. Chapter 7 starts this, it doesn't start, but it continues this conversation dealing with wisdom of God, or the wisdom that we think we need versus the wisdom that will help us get through this life. Think about when you were going off to set up your life. You were leaving home, or even when you're sending your own kids off for that. What did you try to instill in them? Maybe a hard work ethic, maybe the idea of, I'm going to shoot for a goal or have something in mind and strive toward it. What is our goal as Christians? What is our purpose for being here? What goal are we striving to? One of the questions I always ask, I used to do a little kids class, and I would always end with this question. And it is, what is your goal in life? What is it for you? What's your goal? Heaven. Okay, that's it. One word. That's how I'd get them to respond. What's your goal in life? Heaven. Because that kind of covers the rest of it, right? That covers this thought of why the day of death is better than the day of birth if I have a good name. Because again, there's all of those promises, all of that blessings that God has bestowed upon us, or will, because we have been faithful. All right, any thoughts with verse 1 here? All right, let's start with verse 2 then, and then we'll kind of read through this and make some comments. It said, "It is better to go into the house of mourning than the house of feasting, for this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of face the heart is made glad. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of the fool is in the house of mirth. It is better for a man to hear the rebuke of the wise than to hear the song of the fools." Now, these few verses are essentially going back and forth and saying what? We can listen to whom? Or we can experience what in this life? sadness, sorrow, we can experience joy, but notice which one brings us more: knowledge, wisdom, understanding of this world. Why does a kid not touch a hot stove twice? What happens when they touch it that first time? I've got a scar somewhere, well, that's probably faded by now, but somewhere on my belly from when I was very young and I was getting a pan out of the oven, and Mom had told me, don't touch it, it's hot. And I wasn't paying attention, and I just grabbed it and pulled it out, and it burnt my stomach. She didn't have to tell me that anymore. The pain had brought an experience, and that experience had led me to some wisdom, right? Or at least the experience let me realize the wisdom is what I needed to follow in the first place. Sometimes what we need is to go through the difficult times so we can understand why things are better with Christ, why there's peace and hope and joy to be found in Him. Again, remember, this preacher, Solomon, is going through all of these great and not miraculous, but wonderful things that he's done. Buildings and pleasures and things to enjoy. But through all of it, he's still saying it's better to have that good name than 2,000 years of life, or, to have all these kids, or to have all this wealth. All right, let's look at verse number 6 and 7 here. It says, "For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of fools. This is also vanity." Again, here's one of these passages that I just love, because have any of you ever heard fools laughing before? What does it sound like? It's probably not describing the actual sound of foolish laughter, but more the idea of it's a constant thing. How often in this life do we have to deal with foolish individuals talking either about us or about God? Or that's everyday life, right? You start a fire, a campfire, and you sit by it, and those logs just keep crackling, right, till the fuel source is gone. What are fools going to do? They're just going to keep talking. They're going to keep being foolish in their speech. Remember this one, because it connects with a thought near the end of the chapter. Somebody say something? No. Okay. All right, let's look at verse 7 now. "Surely oppression drives the wise into madness and bribes the corrupt heart. Better is the end of a thing than its beginning, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Be not quick in your spirit to become angry, for anger lodges in the hearts of the fools." I was talking to somebody and need this phrase, right? All right. "Be not quick in your spirit to become angry, for anger lodges in the heart of fools. Say not, why were the former days better than these? For it is not from wisdom that you ask this." Better is the end of a thing than the beginning. Again, tying it back to that first verse. Everything in this world's going to end, right? Nothing we can do to stop that. But it's how we endure the thing while it exists. How we live our Christian life, how we walk on this world facing the difficulties and problems and pleasures and joys, and how we either stay faithful to God or keep Him our focus, or we choose to follow after something else. Now, look at verse 10 if you would. Any of you ever made this statement before, or something similar to it? Why were the former days better than these? What's the statement? How do we phrase it here? Remember what? Remember the good old days. What do we usually mean by those phrases? When you think of the good old days, what comes to your mind? Simplicity? Okay. Okay. Maybe the idea of peace or safety. Right? Less responsibility. Burdens are lessened. Anybody else? Okay, maybe sin and wickedness wasn't as much. Now, are all those things true? Was there less sin back in the good old days? What happened to Sodom and Gomorrah back in Genesis? Town destroyed because of their wickedness, right? You read through the Old Testament essentially all the way to the New, and there's always groups of people that are what? Involved in sin and wickedness and, abominations before God, but God takes care of them. They're destroyed or wiped out, or when their time has come, they're done away with. What is it that makes the good old days so good? We were young. Oh, they're done. Maybe that's it. We've already lived them, right? The joys and pains are set. We know what it is. I think that's correct as well. And I think that goes into part of it, this idea of it's not that there weren't bad times during those, whatever the good days are that you're thinking of. It's that I have to choose today to serve God and know that it was just as hard then to be a Christian, or I had the same obstacles to climb, or darts of Satan to dodge or defend against. But it's just I look back and I think, well, when I was a kid, I didn't have to do this, right? I could run around and play, or I didn't have the responsibilities that I did before, those kind of things. We look back and we latch on to some of the good, but we forget the bad. The point being with this is we need to remember that our fight to be a Christian, our struggle to make it to heaven, is a daily struggle. And there are times and seasons for every part of life, right? Maybe it was a little bit easier back then to be a Christian. Maybe there was a little bit less sin, or maybe it was just hidden a little bit more, or you had to dig for it a little bit more, whatever way you want to think of it. But it was still there for anyone to find. Why were the former days better than these? They weren't. Because today can be as good as tomorrow and yesterday, and as long as I know that I have my home in heaven waiting for me. Again, not that the problems and difficulties won't happen, but that I can make it through these things. All right, let's look at verse 11 now. 11 through 13. It says, "Wisdom is good with an inheritance, an advantage to those who see the sun, for the protection of wisdom is like the protection of money. And the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the life of him who has it. Consider the work of God, who can make straight what he has made crooked." Now he's talking about wisdom here, and what's he equating it to? He's saying wisdom is on the same playing field or the same level as what? Having riches. Wealth and knowledge can get you to the same place, right? Or at least get you pretty far in the same directions. But the point here with this is, you look at it, he's saying it's good, both of them are good. Wealth, riches, they can get you along, but verse 13, what can we as mankind do? No matter how wise we are, no matter how much wealth or power we possess, can we change what God has ordained? Solomon, quite often in this book, makes the statement similar to this, that he searched for knowledge, or that he's tried to gain wisdom or insight on these things. And yet, quite often, he makes the statement, it escapes me, or, I don't know everything I need to, or something similar to that. The wisest man on the earth said, I'm still learning. I'm still struggling. I'm still striving for these things. We can't change what God has put into place. Consider the work of God, who can make straight what he has made crooked. I want you to think of an impossible feat that you've worked on in your life. Something that was a feat. Anybody work on or restore cars? A little bit. How much effort goes into taking a car that's out in a pasture and then turning it into something that is showcase worthy? I mean, you got to take the rust off, you got to get it running, you got to replace the parts that don't work, you got to clean everything out. You know, that's just touching on all of the aspects of it. But you see, it's something we built, something mankind built, so we can understand the processes with it and what we need to do to fix it. Now, how in the world can we do that with, say, the cycle of the planets? Can we shift or alter that? Yet, how many movies are there out there about that very same thing? I watched one with the boys recently that essentially they put a big rocket on the Earth and pushed it out of the way of an asteroid or something like that. But humans imagine that we can accomplish anything, that we can change anything if we work hard enough or we have our smartest people work on it long enough. We can't change what God has set in order. But yet, so many wise individuals or learned individuals will spend their lifetime studying and studying and studying after something and yet never be able to see the truth of it. I have no idea. I didn't think to look up any numbers on this, but how much money do you think is spent on things related to evolution and teaching it and promoting it and kids learning it? I mean, we could go to different levels, start at the local level, schools that our kids are in. Move up to the state level, move up to federal, move up to the world. Millions, billions of dollars spent on it. Does it change the fact that God created the world? So all of this effort being put to something, yet they can't make straight what God has made crooked, right? So this is the thought here with wisdom that comes from man versus wisdom that comes from God. And it is this idea that it's better for us to give up everything on this life, to go through pain and torture and difficulty and trial and have that good name with God, than to, we'll use Hebrews 11, to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, right? That's what the author here is trying to get us to see. Again, he's already experienced all these things. He's already dug and searched out these truths. And now he's laying them out for us. All right, let's look at verse 14. It says, "In the day of prosperity be joyful, and in the day of adversity consider. God has made the one as well as the other, so that man may not find out anything that will be after him." All right, so consider prosperity and consider adversity. What about them? What are we to consider? What has God made? Both of these positions. I like to think of Paul in Philippians chapter 4, where he talks about, "I can do all things through Christ who strengtheneth me." I think I mentioned this once or twice before. But the chapter leading up to that is this whole idea of, he said, I've been shipwrecked, I've been beaten, I've been this, I've been that, but with Christ I can make it. So come back to verse 14. "In the day of prosperity be" what? Joyful. All right, so when God is blessing us, we thank God for the blessing. And then in the day of adversity, when Satan is focusing on us, any of you ever had a day like that before, that Satan was just after you? Maybe it was through the kids or through work or whatever it is, but we have those days where it seems like we are being overly focused on by the evils of the world. But God has made one as well as the other, so that man may not find out anything that will be after him. I think the thought is, we don't know what's going to happen, right? Right, Barry? We don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, whether good or bad. Now, we can make some guesses, right? Is the sun going to come up? Are we going to wake up? Probably, hopefully, Lord willing. Is our car going to crank in the morning? Is work still going to be there? Are the kids going to still need to be fed and clothed to get to school. And we can make some guesses. We can understand some of the routines of life, but we can't tell when we're going to get sick. We can't tell when a flood or when acts of nature happen. But we can be joyful when God is blessing us and consider maybe I need what's happening, or maybe through whatever's happening to me, maybe I'll gain something that I need. Again, when I was younger, I was probably more brash than anything else. I didn't tend to think before I spoke. And like I told you, I prayed to God for patience, and here I am with lots of patience now. God gives us what we need to make it through and to make it to where we need to be. We just have to be willing to recognize we're not going to straighten God's path. We're not going to change what He has laid out and give ourselves over to Him. All right, verse 15 now. It says, "In my vain life I have seen everything. There is a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs his life in evildoing." Now, any of us understand what's being said here? A righteous man that what? Dies in his righteousness. Because he's righteous, he chooses not to maybe steal or take something that might prolong his life or whatever it is. But then the wicked is prolonged in his evildoing. Again, you think about people of the world who make their wealth, all they care about is this life. So they're going to spend all of their money, all of their time, and all their efforts here on what they're looking at and what this world can provide to us. The preacher here, Solomon, is saying, I've seen this happen. The righteous die, and the wicked live a prolonged and exorbitant life. Now, verse 14, "Be not overly righteous, and do not make yourself too wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Be not overly wicked, neither be a fool. Why should you die before your time?" Now, this almost seems bad how it's phrasing it here. Don't be overly righteous. Can we be overly righteous? Or how is being overly righteous a bad thing? Anybody got an idea? Okay. Holier than thou type personality. Anybody else? Here's the group that jumps into my mind when I'm reading this, and it's the Pharisees. You think about what they did in the New Testament with Christ. They would follow the law, but it was, this law where they'd put a line here and God's line was over here. They altered it and changed it just enough so it fit them and what they wanted, and maybe bring in Romans 10, first 10-ish verses there, where it talks about the idea of they have a righteousness, but it's not God's righteousness, it's their own righteousness. Maybe we look at ourselves and we try to figure out what to do, separate from God, separate from His Word, and decide that our way is better than His. I think the point that we're looking at with 15 through 18 is this idea of I don't know how to phrase it without sounding bad, but anybody, I'm sure all of you have that one person in your life that always nitpicks everything. They always find where you're wrong on something and where you messed up and where you forgot to. Anybody got okay. Seems like that. That seems to be what's being talked about here. Don't be overly righteous. Don't pick and pick and pick and nitpick over little things that don't matter. Things that aren't going to keep us in or out of heaven. I had a friend, maybe this is a good example for it, maybe it's not, you tell me later. I had a friend he was a young preacher at the time, and he was coming back, and he was coming back from Walmart, I think it was, and he said he saw somebody not put their cart back in the, what do you call it, the corral, whatever it is. I know, I've never done that. But here was the statement he made. And he said, you know, as a Christian, it's sinful for us not to put our carts back in the corral. Is that a sinful thing? I mean, is there a moral aspect to that? Now, is there worse or better? Can we pick ourselves to death over stuff like that? It seems to be this is what it's focusing on. We listen to God, we follow His Word, we study it, we apply His things to our life, but the things that don't matter, these lines that we draw in the sand, we don't need to make them matters or issues of faith. Alienate or turn people off because we don't like a way that they're doing something that God hasn't spoken about. I try to return my cart, but I don't always do it. But I usually put it somewhere where it's not going to hit anybody. So maybe y'all do the same thing. But you go back to this, and it says at the end of the verse there, it is good that you should take hold of this. And from that, withhold not your hand, for the one who fears God shall come out of both of them. And it seems the idea is God's going to take care of us, so we need to make sure that we're focused again not on the world and not on its problems, not on its struggles, but go back to verse 14, the day of prosperity or the day of adversity. God's in charge of both of them. All right, verse 19. Wisdom gives strength to the wise men more than 10 rulers who are in a city. Is this physically true? Is one wise man more powerful than 10 rulers of 10 cities? Or 10 rulers of one city, however you read. What would our world say? You've got 10 kings or 10 governors sitting in their palaces, castles, whatever it is. Are they more powerful than the one wise man? By the world standard, absolutely. The person who has the most wealth, the person who has the most influence, the person who has the biggest army, right? But the thought here, again, is it doesn't matter what the person has physically. It doesn't matter what this person has to fall back on. If they don't have the wisdom of God, if they don't have the strength that comes from being, go back up to verse 1 there, a good name. Go back to verse 18, the one that fears God. If those don't describe me, then I'm not a wise person. Then I don't have, again, all these blessings or comforts or peace or hope or whichever aspect of it we're talking about. Wisdom gives strength to the wise. Why is it that we can stand against the atheist who scream up and down that the world is billions of years old and that we evolved from apes? How can we stand calmly in a situation like that? Genesis 1:1, right? In the beginning, God did what? It doesn't matter what the world says, right? The wisdom of God is what it is. So let's trust the wisdom of God then, not what the world pushes on us or the things that might lead us away from Him. All right, let's start or look at verse 20 now. Surely there is not a righteous man on earth who does good and never sins. Is that truthful? Any of you without sin? None of us, right? For all have sinned and done what? Fallen, come short or fallen short of the glory of God, right? Numerous places throughout the Old and New Testament that show this fact that we as human beings fail, and we fail often, and we have weaknesses that we think we've gotten over, and yet we fall to them again. Surely there is not a righteous man on earth who does good and never sins. Now, does that mean we shouldn't strive for that? Does that mean we shouldn't strive to be like Christ? Oh, well, I'm just going to sin, so nothing I can do about it, so let's just go and live my life of sin. Is that what it means? Is that what the passage is implying here? No. It's saying recognize that all of us have sinned. Recognize that everyone has fallen short of the glory of God. Now, I want us to notice the next one because the next two verses, 22 and 23. Actually, it might just be 21 and 22. This is a passage that until I guess, ran across it in my own study or somebody was preaching it, one time when it came up in my reading it, and it helped me in my workplace relationships quite a bit. All right, so 21 and 22. Do not take to heart all the things that people say, lest you hear your servants cursing you. Your heart knows that many times yourself have cursed others. I'm going to take the cursed and change that a little bit and say the word gossip or talking about others. Any of you ever heard people talking about you? How'd you feel about that? We hear them saying these negative things, or, did you hear about so-and-so? It's this pit, right? And you think, well, why are they talking about me? What have I done to them? Well, the answer is sometimes nothing. The answer is sometimes we are just humans and we just tend to talk, right? We tend to gossip sometimes. But notice what's said again. Don't take to heart all of these things. You hear it, but what do you do with it? Throw it away, right? That's kind of difficult because, again, people are talking about us or saying things about us. We might want to change, alter ourselves, or, fix the problems or whatever it is. But God is telling us here, don't listen to them. Don't worry about that. Verse 22 then, here's the reason. Because you yourselves know that many times you have gossiped, talked, cursed others. Any of you ever talked about others behind their back? I'm guilty of that. So we understand that we do it sometimes. God is saying it's going to happen around us, that it's going to be done, but what do? We choose not to listen to the gossip of the world around us. How much of your life could you spend on trying to please others? Every single second, right? Because there's always going to be somebody that doesn't like something that I'm doing, or some way that I'm living, or some way that I'm acting. So what do I do when I hear about these things that people, the world, don't like about my life? What if I hear people saying they don't like the fact that I go to worship every Sunday? They don't like the fact that I'm going to vote for people that are going to further Christian ideas, principles, or at least that's what I'm going to try to do. They don't like the idea that we speak against sin when it's set in front of our kids or displayed in the middle of town. So what do? How do I act? How do I listen? How do I respond? We don't. You hear it, you understand it, you know that that's just the way people are, and then we go back to serving God. So here is this great piece of information for us as we deal with the world. People are going to talk about you. Don't listen to them. Because you've talked about people before, and how many of those things do you remember? How many of those things did you actually mean or really knew were to be true, or whatever it is? Serve God and don't listen to what others have to say. All right, verse 23 and 24 now. He says, all this I have tested by wisdom. I said, I will be wise, but it is far from me. That which has been is far off and deep, very deep, and who can find it out? Anybody have an idea what he's talking about here? What is this deep and very far thing? All right, look at the first part of verse 23. He said, all this I have tested by wisdom. I said, I will be wise. It's this idea that he's searching for knowledge or wisdom. He's saying to himself, I am going to learn and know everything that I can. But can anybody or can one person learn everything there is? How many times has Solomon in this discourse or in this chapter said, I've searched, I've looked, I've dug, I've spent my life, and yet I still don't have all the answers. Think about scientists in academia today. All of this effort and time spent toward maybe some amazing things, medicines and life-saving devices, things like that, but often it's all this work over nothing. Any of you ever looked into, maybe I shouldn't bring this up, but I got down a rabbit hole of looking at some government waste sometime, just random things the government spends money on, and it was all this stuff like $300,000 to study why polar bears didn't come down into the continental U.S., or what alcohol did to clams. Just these random things. Maybe they have some bearing. Maybe somebody will find stuff out, but the point is there's always something that you can test or study or learn, or something you can. We're never going to know everything there is about this world, but God does. So we don't have to understand everything. We don't have to know, how does God keep the water cycle going? How does God keep the planet cool? And we have some insights, right? We know some things, but I don't have to know everything, because I know God knows it. Solomon's saying, I've searched in these very deep things, I've studied, I've dug, and there's always something more to learn. All right, verse 28, and I turned my heart to know and to search out and to seek wisdom and the scheme of things, and to know the wickedness and the folly and the foolishness that is madness. So again, he's stating this thought, I'm dedicating my life to searching out what is the good things for men to do. Verse 26, and I find something more bitter than death. The woman whose heart is snares and nets and hands are fetters. He who pleases God escapes her, but the sinner is taken by her. Behold, this is what I found, says the preacher, while adding one thing to another to find the scheme of things. Notice he said that several times, to find the scheme of things, or to know the way of things, which my soul has sought repeatedly, but I have not found. One man among us, 1,000 I find. One man among 1,000 I found. But a woman among all these I have not found. See, this alone I found, that God made man upright, but they have sought out many schemes. Now, is he saying it's more likely for men to be righteous than it is women? Is that what we draw out of this? I might say, think about where Solomon was looking. How many wives and concubines did he have? What was his source of the females in his life? I think it's forward in history. Go to Esther. Is that right? Forward in history? Yeah, because it's one of the deportations. So go forward with Esther. Even when she's among all of the queens and the people there, it talks about a good deal of them being worldly. One stands up against it, but it seems like in those courts it was a very rowdy situation. So the thought being is, he's saying, it's hard to find a righteous person, isn't it? Say that again. Well, you think about, again, he pulled them from everywhere, but I think he was pulling them, though, from the royal families, the rich, the wealthy. He wasn't going to synagogues, not synagogues at this time, but temple, places of worship. I think the point that we take away from this last part is, it's hard to be righteous in this world. It is a difficult thing to stay faithful. But the end of it, end of verse 29, see, this alone I found, that God made man what? Where do we find uprightness, or the ability to be right? Not with ourselves, not with anything we find in the world, but the thought here is, it is with God. With God alone I can stand, right? Philippians 4 verse 13, I can do all things how? Through Christ, God, who does what? Strengthen. It's this same thought, right? Solomon is saying these things 2,000 to 3,000 years before we have it given to us again. And again, it's echoed throughout the Old and New Testament. You guys tonight, I want you to ask yourself a question. I can't answer it for you now. I might have some indications, but but you're going to have to say yes or no to this, or I am or I am not. Are you a righteous individual? Okay? That's going to be our discussion or our thought leading into next week, okay? What is the standard of righteousness? Where do we decide, or where do we figure out what the upright thing is? All right, so we'll pick up on chapter 8 next week. Do we have any thoughts or comments before we close tonight? All right, if you would, let's bow our heads. Let's have another word of prayer before we dismiss. Our dear gracious Heavenly Father, we again are thankful for this time and this place that we can come and study and learn about your word. We pray that you would be with each of us, help us to serve you well, help us to be the lights to those in our community. Help us to be thankful and grateful for the things that you have blessed us with and the blood that Christ shed for us. Please be with those of our number that we've mentioned that are sick, that are going through procedures and things of that nature. Be with them as only you can.